Okay, everybody, round two. We're going to try and make this technical stuff work today. I am going live with Dr. Will Busciewicz. We're talking about his amazing new book, Plant Powered Plus, as I'm trying to get the tech stuff. My brain can't work on two things at one time. All set up here. I hope you're all having a lovely day. Hey, hey, welcome, welcome. Yes, Dr. B, we made it work.
Finally, let's
Second
go.
time's a charm. This is awesome. It's so good to see you, my friend.
Oh, it's good to see you. How are you doing?
I'm
Happy Wednesday.
awesome. Happy Wednesday. Wellness Wednesday over here.
Yeah,
I'm
nice.
so glad. Thanks for joining me. Hey, I mean, come on now.
There it is.
Congratulations.
Yeah, thank
There it
you.
is. Yeah, this is so amazing. Um, I appreciate you taking the time today to chat because I know so many people who are joining on are thrilled. I have had so many people message me like, thank you. I have so many questions for Dr. B. I wrote down some notes to maybe guide us, but can you tell us about your new book, Plant Powered Plus?
Yes. So first of all, Natalie, thank you. Thank you everyone for being here. I first want to tell you this, that you and we hung out at the American College of Lifestyle Medicine meeting a few years ago,
Yeah.
and I just got certified.
Yes, we love it.
So, oh, I
Go
think I may have
lifestyle
already told you
medicine.
that though. Okay,
Hmm.
cool.
It's awesome.
Um, okay, this brand new book is a 3-year effort. And basically, where I started from is that I had patients who were dealing with chronic inflammatory health conditions, like ulcerative colitis, for example. And what I kept hearing from them is that they would go to other doctors, no, not trying to say anything about other doctors, but they would go to other doctors and then they would come to me and they would say, what I'm hearing is just take your meds, it doesn't matter what you eat.
Hmm.
And it was confusing to them because they're like, but I don't feel well, so I know something is wrong. So I said, yeah, you need guidance because ultimately that's the opportunity to heal your microbiome,
Yeah.
right? The medication is important too, but the lifestyle, that's where the opportunity exists to like really get to the root of the issue, not just suppressing inflammation, but actually like
Yep.
getting the immune system healthy again.
Yes.
And there was no book that I could sit there with a straight face and recommend, right? There's so much
Yeah.
stuff that's out there that's like kind of oriented towards these people, and it's not evidence based.
Right.
And it puts them into a tricky position of like things that are a little bit more on the scale of trendy
Hmm.
and that are really, really hard to keep up because it's
Yep.
like ridiculously restrictive.
Yeah.
So, and as I entered into that conversation of like, hey, I need to address that, that's where I started. And then I looked out at the world and I realized everything that we're treating as medical doctors, like nearly everything that we're treating as medical doctors, has an inflammatory element.
Mm.
And it's not to say that the only thing causing disease is inflammation. Clearly, it's more complicated than that. Clearly, there's genetics and other elements. But I I went out to figure out how many studies can I get, how many health conditions can I get a study that if I'm sitting across from my colleague, I can show them the paper
Hmm.
that shows that this health condition is an inflammatory health condition. And I found over 130. And of course, it's all the autoimmune stuff
Yeah.
and all of the allergic stuff. That's like by definition. But it's also metabolic stuff, right? People don't think of obesity, diabetes, hyperlipidemia as being inflammatory health conditions. They are.
They are. Yeah.
It's mood disorders. It's hormonal issues, both men and women.
Mm-hmm.
Fertility, both men and women. This wonderful conversation around perimenopause and menopause. I'm so glad that we're having it. But we need to make sure that we're clear. These are inflammatory issues when the menopausal symptoms are out of control and raging,
Yeah.
right? And in men, the drop in testosterone, right? Erectile dysfunction.
Hmm.
So, um, anyway, I see this as the health related challenge of our time as medical doctors.
Yeah.
And the problem that I see is that you could go to 5 doctors for 5 different health issues. You could go and be like, okay, so I'm overweight, I have high blood pressure, I have high cholesterol, I'm anxious, and I'm depressed. I actually just described to myself from 2012. That's where I
Yeah.
was. And all of those things actually tie into inflammation. So in the conventional healthcare system, you treat 5 health conditions with 5 medications.
Hmm.
But if we were going to move past the symptoms-based approach, we would ask, what's causing this?
Right.
And we'd realize that there's a common cause, and that's inflammation. And so that's where we need to actually create solutions. So that's what this book is about.
And when you say, symptoms-based approach, I also hear siloed approach, right? I work in primary care. I see it all the time that a lot of times patients will have a multitude of symptoms that then they are siloed out to different specialists for care. And I truly see it as my job as a primary care physician to see the entire picture and the entire person. And I think when people start to see that entire picture, they see this common thread of inflammation. And, you saying that you wanted to create something that you could go to a colleague and say, like, this is evidence-based. I see fiber fueled in the background. When I literally prescribe that book that you wrote to my patients, it is wholeheartedly because you follow evidence-based medicine and you did the research on it. And it's not grifty, it's not catchy, sexy stuff. It's very straightforward, the real stuff that I think could really help patients. And, it takes a lot of buy-in, it takes a lot of work on their part. But I think people just want to feel better.
People just want to feel better. That's our opportunity.
Yeah.
Right? Because if we can give them tools that actually will fulfill that, that's how we as medical doctors achieve our goal, right? It's not easy to make change, but if the change makes you feel better, you don't want to go back.
Right.
Right? So, but the issue is that the old-fashioned traditional stuff is overwhelmingly the opportunity that really is what is going to transform your health.
Yeah.
So as an author, like my job is to try to take these topics and make them interesting, make them sexy, make them exciting, right? But then at the same time, the references come to my website. Everything is referenced in the same way that I write when I'm writing a scientific article.
Mm-hmm.
And so you can literally see, like it removes any effort on your end. You want to know what reference I have for that statement I just made. There it is. I've provided it to you.
Yep.
So, and I think like when you have that evidence-based tools, then ultimately the individual person, it's not one size fits all. We put the tools on the table, and then my hope is that you, the reader, will have an aha moment or several as you read this book. And it's not going to be the same moment for everyone. And you're like, that's the thing.
Yeah.
That's what's missing. And then that motivates you.
Well, one of my favorite things, I have like so much earmarked in this book, but one of my favorite things that you wrote was an N of one, right? Like you as the individual patient are your own sample size right there, and you deserve tailored care, right? And I think that your readers see that, and that's very evident. And one of the things that I loved, I wrote down on page 104, this is so dorky, but alas, because we're going to talk about
Forgive us for being nerdy, everyone.
Sorry.
Forgive us. Yeah.
We're going to talk about your 4 nutrition workhorses, but I loved how you talked about forgetting dietary tribalism and removing that label, and instead, how can these facts, this information, then be tailored into your life as an N of one and your body and the things that you're dealing with. And I think that is how we're going to reach people, on en masse, as opposed to one size fits all approaches.
Health doesn't care about like what's popular, what's trendy.
Mm-hmm.
If anything, what we should see is that in 2020, a plant-based diet was the trendy diet. And like 3 years later, the carnivore diet was the trendy diet, right? So if you're allowing trends to dictate what you eat, that's something that we need to avoid.
Yes.
And to me, there's this core of what is health promoting that is essential for all of us because it's our biology. It's who we are. And yes, we adapt it and make it our own, and we incorporate it in our own way. But at the same time, these are things that we can't get away from. Our body needs them. And so the 4 workhorses are really about identifying like what are the 4 foundational elements that allow you to build an anti-inflammatory diet regardless of the label.
Yeah.
And so that's what it's about. Yeah.
So, number one being fiber, which finally fiber is having its day, but you were doing it before it was cool. Okay. I think 2025 was a great year for fiber. Um, and hopefully 2026 even more so. But I want you to tell us about fiber. You know, so many people talk about it, and I prescribe it all the time in clinic. And then the next question is, but where do I get it? You know, but where are the
Yeah.
sources?
Yeah. Well, and the beauty is that the sources are actually very simple, which is plant-based food, right? So when we use an expression like plant powered, basically this is a way for me, like trying to give an attractive label to the idea of eating plant-based food that contain fiber.
Yeah.
And the one of the central like the central thesis of the book is that our body has these three layers of defense: our gut microbiome, our gut barrier, and our immune system. And in that order. So for something to affect us, it must go through our microbes, our gut barrier, and our immune system. And that they rise and they fall together. And fiber is the perfect way to make the entire system rise, because fiber is the food for the microbes. They multiply, they grow, they become stronger. This is why fiber gives big bowel movements, because you basically have procreated a healthier microbiome,
Yeah.
right? And then the fiber stops being fiber due to that interaction, and it becomes short chain fatty acids. And short chain fatty acids, these chemicals, specifically butyrate, are the key to rebuilding the gut barrier. So now we've actually rebuilt the first two layers. And if
Mm-hmm.
you were to do just that, the immune system actually becomes a lot more healthy, because now the immune system is protected. So no longer is it forced to respond to things that are sneaking across the gut barrier.
Yeah.
But in addition to that, the short chain fatty acids actually cross the gut barrier, come into contact with your immune cells, and help to activate these special cells called T regulatory cells that are like the peacekeepers. And they allow this, if you think of your immune system as being your little army, these peacekeepers allow that little army to be organized, precise, tactical when necessary, but they're not going to fight the fight that's not necessary. And
Mm-hmm.
that's exactly where we want to be.
Amazing. You know, I was surprised when you were talking about polyphenols, not because I don't think they belong there by any means, but how little is known. You know, how you admittedly say, like, there's not a ton known about them, but we know that they work. So, can you tell us a little bit about polyphenols?
Yeah, polyphenols are, first of all, you walk into your supermarket and there's these colorful foods. Every supermarket in America puts that before you the first thing you walk in. Why? Because it's attractive.
Yeah.
It's hardwired into us, right? And each of those colors is the result of different polyphenols. You go color by color and start to name the plant-based compounds that basically create those colors. So, and some of these we've heard of: quercetin, resveratrol, curcumin from turmeric. Um, those are polyphenols. There's 8,000 varieties. So we really don't know very much about them. But what we do know in general is that these are big molecules,
Yeah.
so they don't get absorbed by our intestine very easily. But because they're so big, they'll actually work their way, 90 to 95% of them will work their way down to our gut microbiome inside of our colon, and they will actually use enzymes that they have to transform the polyphenols and make them bioavailable, and then they get absorbed. My son just brought me in some beautiful avocado toast. How about that?
Okay. We're going to have to talk about that outside of this call because I need my
Oh,
son
okay.
to do that too.
Yeah. Well trained. He's
That's
Yeah.
amazing.
Well, we'll see what kind of reward he gets for that. It's going to be something good. So, um, anyway, and these polyphenols, they have, so they're starting to sound like fiber because they actually like come into contact with your microbiome, get activated by your microbiome. The microbes get actually healthier and stronger, more capable of producing short chain fatty acids because of
Wow.
polyphenols. The gut barrier then is stronger, and they also have an anti-inflammatory effect on our immune system. So, once again, you're talking about all three of these systems. If that's our thesis, all three of these systems are benefiting from polyphenols. And we don't have an RDA. So RDA is like a recommended dietary allowance, like how much you're
Mm-hmm.
supposed to get to be healthy. We don't have that for polyphenols. We don't have some requirement that is like labeled. But what we do have is recommendations on like how many fruits and vegetables we should get.
Yeah.
And 80% of America is not getting enough fruit, and 90% of America is not getting enough vegetables. So like we're missing the mark on these two.
And you talk about how, fruits and vegetables, like these polyphenols are diverse, just like the different foods that you're actually eating are diverse. And one of the biggest things that you've talked about over the years is plant diversity, period. So yet another reason why plant diversity matters, because then you're getting more variations.
Plant diversity for the win. Like you keep coming back to
Yes.
this because it's like, these are ways for me to educate and explain how we can impact the gut immune connection through our dietary choices. I'm not explicitly married to the idea of it being only plants,
Yeah.
but the issue is that if we look at what really impacts the immune system in the gut most powerfully,
Mhm.
this is it.
Yeah.
And then you simultaneously combine that with what's missing in our diet. Because if it's missing, to add in what's missing is actually the greatest opportunity for healing. And this is
Yeah.
what it is.
Talk about healthy fats. That was number three.
Yeah, healthy fats. So here we see example one,
Hmm.
which is the avocado. So I don't think that fat should be inherently vilified. I actually cringe quite a bit when we attack any macronutrient, whether that
Yeah.
be carbs, protein, or fat. I think they all play a really important role in our health. But the issue is that within each, there's a concept of quality.
Hmm.
We want to choose high quality fats. So the ones that are high quality are the monounsaturated fats, which can be found in an avocado, in extra virgin olive oil, in nuts, and also the omega-3 fats, which are found in seeds like chia seeds, flax seeds, hemp seeds, but also found in fish, shellfish,
Hmm.
and supplements like algae-based supplements, omega-3 fish-based supplements.
Hmm.
So, but those are the healthy fats, and those are, like with the omega-3s, those are what we call essential. So there's a big focus on protein and getting our essential proteins, but there should be an equal focus on getting our essential fats,
Yeah.
and most of us are not. So again, another opportunity.
Yeah. And this is my favorite one, admittedly, fermented foods. We've been doing a lot of sourdough at home lately, making it. But fermented foods, I feel like, are one that people just don't regularly think about, at
They
least
don't.
from what I've gathered interviewing patients.
No, and even people who are doing healthy diets are not really eating the fermented foods.
Yep.
Why? Because we're a cultural melting pot in the United States. And so many of us have sort of drifted away from the cultures that defined our families a few generations ago. But if you were to go back to those times, the food of your great grandparents, this is what they were eating. This is like just entrenched in, their dietary patterns. Go out across the globe, and every single culture in human history, fermented foods are the celebrated foods. It's like the ones that they define their food culture by, that they love the
Yep.
most.
Yep.
So now sourdough is an interesting one because most of the time when we think of fermented food, we're like, oh, well, it has to be raw, it has to be living,
Right.
right? And sourdough, obviously, you bake the dough. And there's this new research, Natalie, on heat killed bacteria that they're calling ghost or zombie
Oh,
probiotics,
cool.
which I think is a great name. I love it.
Why won't you die?
Yeah. So they are dead and they still have an effect
Crazy.
because what we have discovered is that if you take these healthy microbial cells, it's not just whether or not they're active and alive and doing stuff. It's actually the cell itself.
Hmm.
And so heat killing these probiotics has been shown, and this is both in the supplement space where these are now being packaged as postbiotics, and it's an emerging area in supplements. And simultaneously, like when you talk about sourdough, the first thing people say is, well, it's baked, so there's no microbes. Actually, no, the zombies are there.
So this is a good example of zombies. We're okay with this.
Oh,
Um,
100%. These are great zombies. These are the good, these are friendly zombies.
these are the good guys.
Yep.
So I want to talk as we round out. There's been a lot of conversation lately about dietary guidelines that have come up recently, which aren't honestly that different from previous ones. But in some ways, I have a couple of questions for you because it seems like these current guidelines do talk a little bit more about saturated fat intake as a not terrible thing, and it doesn't necessarily tell us that alcohol is something we should be limiting as much as possible. And I want to hear from you from an inflammation perspective and a gut microbiome perspective, the role of saturated fats and alcohol intake, and like, should we take heed and maybe throw up a question to these guidelines?
So the interesting thing, so first of all, if you dig into chapter 3 of my book, one of the important conversations that we have to have this conversation is what is it about our current food system that is problematic, right? Because if you don't have clarity on where the opportunities are that are good, and you don't have clarity on what are the potentially problematic parts, then you can't have a real direction.
Yeah.
So saturated fat in appropriate amounts is not something that I have tremendous concern about. I don't think we should be zero saturated fat.
Mm-hmm.
But the issue is the overconsumption of saturated fat, particularly within the context of no fiber intake, right? Where the saturated fat is basically given free rein to dominate
Mm-hmm.
and cause trouble. And it does that in the gut.
Yeah.
Because if it's not being balanced out with fiber, like balancing out with fiber addresses a lot. I'm not saying that you have to be vegan in order to be healthy. That's not actually true. But if you don't balance it out with fiber, then the saturated fat creates this environment where the microbiome shifts towards basically dealing with an environment of high fat, high protein.
Mm-hmm.
And you get the emergence of bacteria like Bilophila wadsworthia, which is with total clarity an inflammatory bacteria that has been associated with colorectal cancer, the number 2 cause of cancer death, that by the way is getting like shifting towards younger populations,
Mm-hmm.
right? And I'm of the belief, like, number 1, colorectal cancer, massive microbiome input into the pathogenesis
Yeah.
of this cancer. And number 2, when you're raising generations with no fiber and tons of saturated fat, of course it's going to start to shift towards younger populations. This really shouldn't be a surprise.
Yeah.
So Bilophila wadsworthia, this bacteria that you get from excessive saturated fat intake, is associated with colorectal cancer, and it's also associated with inflammatory bowel disease. And so neither of which we want, obviously.
Right.
Both tremendous, terrible inflammatory health conditions. We want the microbiome to be metabolically on the other side, which is an emphasis and focus on the digestion of fiber, right? And then like the fat is just kind of present, but not actually the dominant factor. So the dietary guidelines, here's the major issue that I see. They didn't change the actual recommendation on the percent calories from saturated fat. It was 10% in 2020. It's 10% in 2025. But they softened it.
Mm-hmm.
And they put out a pyramid, which is not actually consistent with the actual written document. And it's very confusing because the average person doesn't have the intellectual curiosity that a healthcare practitioner does to read the document. The average person is going to look at the pyramid and shape their diet around that.
Yep.
And at the top of the pyramid, at the exact same level of intensity and value as vegetables and fruits,
Mm-hmm.
they put red meat and cheese and dairy products, and just a little bit lower was the butter.
Yep.
Right? But it actually makes absolutely no sense to me because it's not consistent.
Yeah.
Because the document says less than 10% of calories from saturated fat, and the average American is 13%.
Yeah.
You have no room to increase. If anything, you need to decrease. So a framework that's encouraging those foods is more like, hey, this is what I like to eat, and less, hey, this is what the science says.
Right. Boom. Thank you for that.
Mic
I'm
drop.
assuming, yeah, that was just beautiful mic drop. And I would say along the lines of the alcohol part of that too, because I think there's been a discussion around alcohol, in some moderation is okay. And what are you seeing with regard to its effect on inflammation in the gut microbiome?
So first of all, before we even like get into gut microbiome and inflammation, one glass of alcohol before bed is enough to disrupt your sleep.
Mhm.
That is enough information right there. The
Yep.
vast majority of alcohol consumption is in the evening.
Yep.
That's enough information right there. We
Yep.
don't need more. There's data on the development of cancers, which by the way are inflammatory cancers, meaning that inflammation is contributing to the development
Yep.
of these cancers, such as breast cancer, where 1 cup of alcohol per day is sufficient to increase your risk. But there was a study, and I'll try to summarize this real quick. It's in the book, that changed my mind about alcohol because I used to create some space for me to like have a beer in the evening or have a glass of wine in the evening. I've actually removed that entirely.
Mhm.
So because basically what they showed is they were looking at 2 factors in the blood and they were checking it every 30 minutes after they had people consume a whole bunch of alcohol. They checked the blood alcohol level and they checked the level of a bacterial product called lipopolysaccharide, which Natalie, we know from being in the ICU is what we call bacterial endotoxin,
Mhm.
right? And contributes to sepsis and severe infections, right? But on a lower level, it contributes to inflammation.
Yeah.
And what they showed in this study was that the levels of the blood alcohol and the lipopolysaccharide, that you could take the 2 graphs and put them over each other like this. That's what they look
Wow.
like that.
My God.
So just matched. And the lipopolysaccharide, which again is basically contributing to inflammation, did not go to zero until the alcohol went to zero.
Wow.
So from my perspective, if you drink enough to have a buzz,
You're
this
doing
is
damage.
contributing. You're doing damage.
Another mic drop. Well, I know we are done with our time, Dr. B. I am so grateful for you. I know patients are. Everybody, go out and get this amazing book. Get all the books by Dr. Busciewicz. Appreciate you and everything you do for our community. Thank you.
Natalie, thank you for having me. Thank you everyone
Yeah.
for hanging with us. I'm jumping into another with Chase tuning. So for anyone who's
Awesome.
interested, just hop out and then hop back in, and I'll see you in a few minutes.
Amazing. Take
Thanks,
care.
Natalie. I'll see you.
Thanks.